Hello, so lovely to see you all. I have the most incredible story to tell you. And it's not my own story, but I just have to share it because this is a story you just have to hear. So I was on my way going past that great city, Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and I was moving through. I wasn't going to the city itself, but I had to go past it on the eastern side. For those of you who are not local and don't know the area, Assyria has as a capital city Nineveh. And Nineveh is called the Great City because it is massive. It is the biggest city up to date that has ever been built. Not only does it have palaces and spectacular buildings, but it also has gardens. And it's built right on the Tigris River. So they have aqueducts and canals that flow water to keep these gardens lush and spectacular all year round. It is also a city of trade. So it's where the north and the east meet and the south and the west, and everybody trades. The Assyrian Empire is splendid. It is wealthy. It is spectacular. But of course, to get there is also a fairly vicious culture. So I wasn't going through Nineveh myself. I was just going past it. And as I came past, I could see the eastern gate, and I saw a man sitting up on a hill. And he was all alone. And around him was debris, like he built a shelter and it had fallen down. And there were these strange withered leaves all over the show. And he looked seriously grumpy. Like he was really angry or upset. And I was quite tired and I was a bit curious about why he was sitting amidst this mess. So I stopped and sat with him. And I said to him, "You look really upset. Was this your plant? Did you grow this plant?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, what are you doing, sitting here staring at Nineveh?" And so he told me his story. And it was so fascinating, I just have to tell you. So this man's name is Jonah. And he is an Israelite. He's a prophet, which means he brings word from God to the people. And he told me that a little while back, he had been at home just doing what prophets do. And God had spoken to him. And God said to him, "Jonah, go to the city of Nineveh, because their evil ways have come up with them." And Jonah said he packed his bag and he headed down to Joppa, which is the opposite direction to Nineveh. And Joppa is a great port. It is a port of trade where these huge seafaring vessels travel through carrying cedar wood. They have spices, silks. It's just the most exotic port. There's so much to see and do in Joppa. But Jonah didn't even look for accommodation there. He went straight to the harbour. And he went to look for a ship. And he went to look for not just any ship, but a seafaring ship that could take him to Tarshish, the furthest place to the west, away from Nineveh, where God had told him to go. And he paid his fare, and the ship had full cargo. They were ready to leave. And he said he got on board the ship, and they set sail. And he was just getting used to the rocky movement of the ship when some bad weather blew in. So Jonah decided he'd get out of the sailor's way, and he would go down to the deepest part of the ship. And while in the depths of the ship, he fell into the deepest sleep. And while he slept, right down in the bottom of that ship, the storm got worse. It got so bad that those sailors who sailed the seas for a living were afraid. And they began to cry out to their gods, "Save us from this storm." But their gods were back home where the idols were, and in the temples in their cities, and their gods did not answer. The storm got worse. So they started to take the cargo, the very reason they were risking their lives, and they threw it overboard to lighten the ship, because the waves were so big, they were breaking over the bow, and the water was filling the ship. It was threatening to sink, but even that didn't work. And then the sailors decided they would cast lots. They would try and find out whose fault was this, because this was no ordinary storm. This wasn't just an angry sea. This was an angry God who had sent the storm and was troubling their ship, and it must be someone's fault. So they cast lots to see who it was. And the lot said it was Jonah. So the captain went down into the depths of the ship, and he woke Jonah up from that deep, deep sleep. And he took him up to the top. And the sailors said to him, Jonah, who are you? Where are you from? What people are you? What do you do? What have you done that we are risking our lives right now? And Jonah said he told them the truth. He told them he's an Israelite and he's a prophet. He serves the most high, mighty God, the creator of heaven and earth and the ruler of the seas. And he was on the run from his God. And they were so afraid, for a God who can control the seas is the most almighty deity. And they said to him, Jonah, what should we do? How do we stop the storm? How do we save our lives? And he said, throw me in the sea. Because it's me that has angered God, not you. And the sea will calm down. And these pagan sailors were horrified. We can't just throw you into the sea. You'll drown. So they pushed out the big oars and they started to try and row back to land. But by now the ship was standing vertical in front of the swells, and as it went over, it was like falling off the very edge of the earth. And the water was pouring over, and the sails were broken, and the oars were broken. They could not do it. So those pagan sailors prayed to him, and they said, please forgive us, God. Forgive us for taking the life of this innocent man. Please don't kill us because of it. But you need to do as you please. And with that, they picked up Jonah and threw him into this raging sea. And he said, as he landed in those ferocious waves, the wind dropped, and the sea started to calm. And from that ocean, he could see them praying and sacrificing to God and making oaths and vows to God himself. And he said his clothes started to fall with that salty cold water, and he started to sink. And the waves were still rocking, and he was going down. And he felt that he was abandoned and would never see the inside of the temple again. And as he sunk further, he thought, this is the end. The seaweed was wrapping around his head. And in his heart, he just knew that this was his own fault. And then out of it came a huge fish, a massive fish that swallowed him up in its mouth. And there he stayed 3 days. That bit of the tale he didn't tell me much of. Beyond that, it was not comfortable. It didn't smell very nice. And from that depth, he started to pray to God. He started to pray to God because he knew in his heart, even though he had disobeyed God, his God could still help him. And he prayed for rescue. And after 3 days, God got that fish to vomit him back up onto the dry land. And as he lay there in a pool of rotting fish, of stomach contents, of seaweed and slime, he heard the voice of God. Jonah, go to Nineveh. Give my message to those people. So Jonah went to the water's edge, and he washed the worst of them up off him. And this time, he went to Nineveh. Now, you might ask, why would a prophet be so reluctant to obey God that he served? Now, Nineveh was splendid, and the Assyrian Empire was great. But they got there on the bones of their enemies. The city's name is the City of Blood, for the Assyrians are an incredibly cruel nation. I have heard tales that when they conquer a city, they take the leaders, and they take their comrades and they cut off their heads, and they force them to wear those heads on top of their own, with the blood and the gore dripping down their faces. They chain them in dog kennels and beat them, and then tear them limb from limb as a public spectacle, while the people bay for blood. And the Assyrians have many enemies, and one nation that has suffered at their hands and that they continue to threaten is the Israelite nation, the people of Jonah. But now he realized God really wanted him to go and speak to his enemy. So he went to Nineveh. And at the time, the Assyrian Empire was going through a little bit of political upheaval. There was rebellion in some of the outlying ranks. Even more important, there had been an eclipse just before, a dreadful omen of doom. And it was into this, fresh from the fish, Jonah. The city is huge. It would take you 3 days to walk around and see everything. So Jonah told me he decided he'd keep his message short. And he went in and he said, in 40 days, the city will be gone. In 40 days, Nineveh is no more. He did that for 1 day. And to his amazement, at the end of that day, his enemies started to repent. They dressed in sackcloth and ashes. They refused to eat food and they cried out to God for repentance. They said they were remorseful and sorry and they would change their wicked ways if he would grant them mercy. Even the king heard what was happening and he took off his robes of royalty and he put on sackcloth and he sat in the dirt. He said even the animals were not to eat and were to wear sackcloth, in the hope that God would grant him mercy for them. And Jonah was hot with anger. And he said to God, this is why I didn't want to come to the city of Nineveh, because I knew your faithful kindness and your mercy would be extended to these evil, awful enemies of Israel. And I am angry. And God said, you're so hot with anger. And he stormed out of the city. He went out of that eastern gate and he went to sit where I had found him. And he built himself a shelter from the heat. And he watched. And in his heart he hoped that the Ninevites would repent of their repentance. And then calamity would come. And as he sat there, God caused a plant to grow up next to him. Overnight, a huge plant, so big, it sheltered him from the sun. And Jonah was so happy with that plant. He was delighted. But the next day, God sent a worm to eat up that plant. And he got a harsh wind to blow in from the east and blow the shelter and the withered plant down. And his shelter withered. And Jonah was so angry that he'd lost his plant. He said to God, I would rather die. Just let me die. Why did you give me this plant to take it away? And I left Jonah pondering God's answer. For he said, Jonah, you cared so much for this plant that you never tended or nurtured. And you cared so much that I took it away. How much more should my mercy extend to the 120,000 Ninevites and all the others? With that, Jonah stopped speaking. That was his story. And that's where the story of Jonah ends. And I leave you to ponder. Do you get upset when God's mercy and grace is extended to your enemies? Do you have just a little bit of Jonah within you? Have a look in your mirror and let me know what you think. Thank you.